Now people are gonna be injured and they're gonna like walk into an office and be suspicious of their
Dude, and I think
of
warranted.
physio.
I think warranted. I think very warranted.
Probably, yeah. Welcome to Combat Learning. I'm your host, Josh Peacock, skill learning specialist for martial arts and a fifth dan in Taekwondo. Head on over to combatlearning.com for more martial arts teaching content. Now, if you're excited to jump in, hit the subscribe button on your podcatcher and enjoy the show. All right, guys, welcome back to the Combat Learning Podcast. Today, I've got Joshua Rampersad. Did I
Yeah, that's
pronounce that
perfect.
correctly?
Smooth.
Awesome, cool. Yeah, a fellow Josh here on the
Yes, yes.
podcast. Have to do it eventually. And you're a physical therapist. Is that
Yes,
correct?
yes. I'm a physiotherapist out of Canada, Ontario, and BJJ athlete and competitor.
Awesome, man.
hmm
That's so I'm always fascinated, like how the constraints-led approach and ecological dynamics, how that gets applied into other types of domains, not just
Yeah.
sport.
Yeah.
A year ago, I had another physical therapist on that was
Mm.
kind of at the beginning of his career, and he had really seen a lot of success with the CLA.
Mm.
And I'm sure that you have your own way of applying it. So I'm interested to dig into that.
Yeah, for sure. We'll get through, sort of how it changes throughout the stages of rehab. We'll talk about how it even applies, how it's different than applying it to sport, just because the environments are different. But yeah, we'll get all through it. Talk about everything.
Sweet, man. So let's start with, like, did you discover it in college? Is that where you first
Yeah.
discovered it, or did you go
Um,
afterwards? Like, how did you
it
stumble
was
into
actually
this?
really, really funny. Like, I was in my first year of physio school. So physio school is for my American listeners in Canada is a master's degree. So like post undergrad, started doing my master's. It's a 2-year master's. So first year of physio school, I started working with another clinician, like just sort of as a mentee under him, and he introduced me to ecological dynamics and dynamic system theory.
Oh, okay.
So as I started to get really deep into that, it's so fascinating, right? So like as soon as I started to really read, I started with Rob Gray's How We Learn to Move, as I think everyone probably should. Was probably around the same time I started to blow up a little bit more in jiu-jitsu. So as I was really deep diving a lot of the white papers, the literature, books, and really expanding my knowledge on it, it started to really blow up in jiu-jitsu. So I started to get like the clinical application and the at least sport application to a sport that means something to me with jiu-jitsu. Probably around the same time. It was obviously a lot more muffled on the jiu-jitsu side and very, I guess, controversial and maybe misunderstood. But that was sort of my exploration between both. It sort of just happened all at once between the clinical side and the sports side as well.
Awesome, man. So, digging into the clinical side,
Mm-hmm.
is that the framework you adopted immediately upon graduation when you went into start practicing?
You know what? I would say no. It's very tricky to apply. I don't even know if it's like necessarily a main staple of my clinical practice, but the
Mm-hmm.
principles and concepts that it affords us, but like gives us, are
Mm-hmm.
they're like definitely woven
Okay.
in. So I'll say like I think it's still very. I guess a little bit of clinical background for myself. I do treat like I would say maybe 70% of my caseload is athletes, and then probably a large majority of those athletes are combat athletes. Mostly jiu-jitsu, tons of strikers, wrestlers. I have judo people, tons of combat athletes. I take a much more like exercise, resistance training, like physical stress to impose
Mm.
adaptations approach. So I'm not too much like super modality based or passive care. We're in the gym, we're doing stuff, we're looking at movement, we're getting stronger, chasing qualities. Um, and that's still the goal. And it's just about like weaving in or sort of working in principles of CLA and variability into treatment, essentially.
Yeah, I like that. I've heard quite a few physical therapists kind of disagree with the establishment on that point, but like, yeah, you actually do, like, because some people will be like, you don't need to be under the bar,
Yeah, I don't know. It's
lifting heavy
tricky.
weight and stuff.
The
Yeah, but like, I don't know. I don't think I agree with that. I'm not a
yeah,
physiotherapist or anything, but I don't think I agree with that.
I don't really agree with it either. So I sort of break it up into two sort of things. There's like passive care treatments. These are things that are like
Mm-hmm.
being done to you, right? Like your soft tissue, like massages, your
Mm-hmm.
scraping, your TENS, your ultrasounds, acu, whatever. All fantastic tools for like symptom relief, but I like everyone sees it all the time. Like it's very temporary relief, which is again not a bad thing. Like if you're very very sensitive, very acute right now, and all you need is a little bit of pain like reduction to like get your life going a little bit better. Yeah, absolutely, we have those tools for you, but they've never really done longer lasting results because they're not really changing anything about you, right? Like you're not adapting to any stimulus in those, right? You feel good for a little bit because your muscles get a little bit
Mm,
looser or they spaz out a little bit and then they relax, and then like in a few days that tension's going to come back.
yeah.
Whereas like active side of treatment, which is usually under bar stuff like exercise based movement options, that's longer lasting, probably like takes a little bit longer to see some results, but the results you gain are way longer lasting or even permanent because you are adapting as a system. Like your muscles are getting stronger, they're getting bigger, they're tolerating more, you're increasing capacity to do stuff, which is real. That's like real tangible capacity that you now have for longer lasts of time. You know what I mean? So it's hard to
Yeah.
argue against active care, I'll be honest.
Right. I agree. I don't know. Yeah. The more I get into like doctoral stuff, and I don't know, I just feel like a lot of experts don't actually, they're not experts.
Yeah, yeah. You know what? I think about that often, but I also think like I don't know. It's hard for me to like I guess like blame, maybe not the right word, but like fault older physiotherapists because I don't know. It's hard to like keep up with literature when you're practicing and sort of change your practice from what you learned in school
Yeah.
and whatever. But that's what mentors are for, you know. Like surround
Hmm.
yourself with good clinicians, good mentors, legit checkers. Test your process, see how it goes. Especially when it comes to
Yeah.
athletes. It's almost impossible to prepare you for an athletic demand if we're not doing athletic things. You know what I mean? Like how can I be like,
Yeah.
dude, you're so strong enough to go back to jiu-jitsu and then we haven't touched anything or done anything,
No.
right?
No,
Yeah,
the level of care is not even close to the level of force production your limbs need
exactly.
to do jujitsu. So it's like,
Exactly.
how are you going to be?
How
How
do
are
you
you clear to do that? No way.
exactly, right? Unless we're actually testing that stuff, which you have to.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's an interesting point. You're talking about the importance of mentors. I mean, mentors are super important.
Yeah.
We really haven't dug much into that in the combat learning podcast. You still have a mentor
Yeah.
in your practice now? Yeah, talk to me
Yeah.
about that.
I was gonna say my shout outs for the end, but this is another physiotherapist in Toronto who also treats like some combat athletes. Just someone when I was in school that was like, I don't know, sort of like living the clinical life that I wanted, right? Like he was training, he was practicing, he was an amazing physio. The only thing I had up on him was I think I knew jujitsu a little bit better and I was training longer than him. But when it came to
Hmm.
clinical stuff, like he was above and beyond. And it just sort of helped me shaped the way I think about physio, sports, clinical applications. Would probably wouldn't have stumbled across ecological dynamics without him. Um, and also, I think it's important like who your mentors are, right? Not just someone that's in the position you want to be, but he often reminded me like, hey, like these are my biases. Like, ask other people, like explore more, like have someone that knows that he's only presenting your like his own biases is important, super important.
Yeah, that is important. A
Mm,
mentor that's not just willing to share knowledge, but's willing to share, but who is willing to share to announce their conflicts of interest in a way.
yeah,
Like this is, hey, I come from this position. Other people that are good practitioners also come from different positions. Like
mm,
ask them what's
absolutely,
going on here and
yeah,
synthesize for yourself. Yeah, it's a great practice as a mentor. Something to keep in
absolutely,
mind.
absolutely.
I think, I mean, in Taekwondo, in Jiu-Jitsu, I guess in Taekwondo, you kind of stick, a lot of times you'll stick under the same master all the way up through, like you just promote all the way up into the
Mm,
senior ranks under the same master. And in Jiu-Jitsu, it's kind of like that too. But I don't know that there's a, there's like, it's rare that you actually have somebody that's like concerned with how you're developing as a coach. Like as long as you
yeah,
meet that minimum
yeah,
threshold, they don't. It's like we don't talk about it. We're talking
yeah,
about other things. You know, we'll talk. We're not going to talk about techniques every time we show
yeah, yeah,
up. Like what's going on in the competition scene. We're not going to talk about pedagogy.
yeah.
So I think that's really important.
It's probably the same with clinicians too, right? Like if they're
Yeah.
delivering maybe even like the minimum amount of results, which could just be symptom reduction, which maybe not long lasting, but like if you're a patient and you don't really know any better, and you go in and you feel pretty good coming out, even if it comes back a week later, you're probably kind of happy, right? Like you're probably like, oh, I
Hmm.
should kind of keep going to this person, and then you just get in that cycle of like you're booked up for like two every 2 weeks. You're seeing this clinician paying money without like long lasting results, but at least it feels pretty good because there's like a little minimum relief that you're getting.
Hmm.
So it's tricky. I think it's just always important to have your own goals and making sure whoever it is, coach, clinician, whatever, is actually helping you progress to those goals.
Yeah. Yeah.
The biggest thing.
Yeah. You need an ethics coach too if you're doing that
Yeah.
to all your to your
Man, I
patients.
think a lot of people. You're touching on a sensitive subject. A lot of crazy stuff in the rehab world, right? With like fear
Yeah.
mongering or like, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Around movement. Oh man, yeah, I hear it.
Mm,
YouTube and Instagram has begun to change that, I think, because a few years ago, when I started just consuming a ton of strength and conditioning
mm,
type of content, everything was about like perfect
yeah,
biomechanics. If you don't lock your back,
yeah,
you're gonna friggin' it's gonna explode, and you're gonna need spine surgery,
yeah,
and your shoulders are gonna like rip out of socket for
yeah.
this movement. And it's like for me, I've had a bum shoulder for from grand mal seizures I had in my early
Mm,
20s, and just like I don't know, when I was a kid I bummed up my ankle. It's not bad anymore, but the shoulder thing is like a constant. It'll reoccur every once in a while. And so for me, I'm looking at that and I was like, oh no. Like,
yeah,
oh
yeah.
man.
And then you go into
And
sport,
then
and you're like, wait,
yeah,
my
yeah.
back's around
And
it.
I always struggled with like the underhooks and stuff because my shoulders felt unstable. And then finally I just bit the bullet and I was like, I got in, started reading Starting Strength, and I was
Okay.
like, and they had a different perspective on that. They're
Mm,
like, actually, you just need to put pounds on the bar
yeah.
and and be gradual about it. Not,
Yes. Exactly.
otherwise you'll injure yourself. Be very gradual, put some pounds on the bar. And I started doing like overhead presses, and my shoulder pain got way better.
Yeah.
And like
Love it.
I could fight for underhooks and
Yeah.
stuff. And I think there's other stuff you can do that's probably even better than that, like dumbbell, because there's more instability, like dumbbell
Yeah.
overhead presses and stuff.
Again, it sort of talks about like varying your training, right? Like it
Yeah.
can be the same quality in a different form,
Mm.
essentially. Yeah, yeah. We'll dive into all of that too, for sure.
Yeah, let's because I wanted to ask you about that. We got off
Yeah,
on the mentor trail.
yeah,
What does the variability look like
yeah.
in your care
So
program?
we'll talk about. I mean, I think your listeners probably know like the why it's important to like have some sort of variability within movement strategies, right? Because we know it makes you a more adaptable mover athlete. It makes you less resistant to like pressure or choking. It makes you have robustness within movement patterns. That means maybe one movement pattern won't get like overuse and lead to injuries. I think the why is pretty like well established. It's more about the how and like the what. So I think the biggest difference when applying any sort of variability or ecological dynamics in rehab as opposed to sport is the environment's obviously a lot more static, right? We're not necessarily chasing skill acquisition in a very dynamic environment as opposed to sport. We're really just chasing I guess in my view, the goal of rehab is like physical qualities, right? And that might mean like strength, muscular endurance, speed work, rate of force development, range of motion, whatever. We're just chasing those qualities. So the environment's different. So it's harder to apply the direct skill acquisition CLA approach in clinic than it is in sport
Mm-hmm.
because the environment is just so constrained. How I sort of think about it is I think about variability as a parameter of the quality I'm chasing. And I'll explain what that means. So for example, I guess like in your case, let's say we needed overhead shoulder strength. That's the quality we're chasing. So strength. And strength to me means that our load is going to be pretty high, which will probably dictate a lower rep range because if the load wasn't heavy enough, then you're spamming like 20, 30 reps, right? Like we're probably getting to that muscular endurance sort of piece. So making sure like the parameters of strength is what I'm getting at. Like the intensity is one parameter where it should be heavy enough that your muscles will adapt to get stronger, right? And with that comes like a rep range or like the volume. Rep range is probably going to be on the lower end. I sort of work in variability as a parameter of that quality. So, for example, upper extremity or shoulder strength is being our quality. Variability may be a parameter, as in, can we gain and express strength in the shoulder? I guess like overhead. Can we gain it through different planes of motion? Can we gain it with like bilateral movements or in stable like dumbbell movements? Can we gain it like in vertical or horizontal pulling, right? You know what I mean? Or pressing, sorry. But you know what I mean? Like, can we gain the quality or use the quality of this shoulder strength in many different ways? And that sort of leads to intertask variability, with a lot of coaches do think about. They do think about like one sort of like horizontal, one sort of vertical press, maybe like some sort of press with a rotation, single arm, double arm, and like varying it up intertask. But I also think there's an intratask component to variability as well, which is within the same exercise as that like overhead shoulder press with a barbell, we'll say. Like, what about like widening grips or constraining your grips or offloading the bar a little bit, things like that. So I sort of inject variability as a parameter of the quality I'm chasing. Does that make sense?
Awesome.
And we can dive into
Yeah, it
it
makes
more.
sense.
Yeah.
Real quick, if you're wondering why your training doesn't quite get you or your students the results you want, it's probably because you don't know about a concept called transfer of learning. Transfer of learning, or simply transfer, is the science of designing practice in a way that is most likely to show up in performance. Go to combatlearning.com and sign up for my zero cost newsletter, and I'll send you my transfer cheat sheet that gives you quick tips on how to supercharge your drills and exercises so that what you train for shows up in sparring and competition. Head on over to combatlearning.com now and sign up. Now back to the episode. Yeah, let's dive into it more. So, variability has a lot of usages. And then you talked about CLA, you're like, so like you don't teach barbell sports, right? So when you talk about, applying CLA, you're not talking about like necessarily or per se getting like becoming a overhead press specialist.
Exactly.
You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
You know what I
Like
mean?
you're building qualities. And so this your use of CLA, you're deploying it towards that end.
Yeah.
I haven't really talked about this on I probably should write an article on it, but I don't know. It's an unfinished thought.
Go
I
on.
call it an anchor, and it's
Sure.
like because people have a lot of trouble. I've kind of touched on it in my writings on aliveness, but in representativeness, but it's I call it an anchor, right? So if you want to know how the CLA is going to apply,
Mm-hmm.
you really need to figure out what is the performance context, like what's the performance environment,
Yeah.
what is it that you're actually anchoring it to.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so,
Yeah.
like, if it's anchored to barbell sports, then you're a strength coach,
Mm.
and that's like, but you're a physical therapist. You're helping people recover from and prevent injuries.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit different.
Yeah. Yeah.
The training is not going to be quite as specialized
Exactly.
to
Right.
one thing. Yeah.
It's hard to make it. Like, I guess that's the difference. It's a real difference when I mentioned like static environment. It's just the aliveness of what we're like let's say I have a jiu-jitsu athlete in clinic and we're doing all this gym work, that's not very representative. In fact, all I'm doing is sort of changing your individual constraints so that when you go to sport, you can now afford more or explore a sporting landscape more. Does that sort of make sense? So like through my qualities, my physical qualities that we're chasing, like range of motion, strength, endurance, rate of force development, whatever, you now have more, or I guess less individual constraints to now like afford more or perceive more in sport and explore a more. I think I use a lot of representativeness later stages, more as like check boxes. So jiu-jitsu is a good example because it's actually really easy in clinic to be very representative, especially where I treat out of here. I'm in an MMA gym, so like right next to this wall is just mat space. So that it becomes really easy to
Nice.
be very representative when it comes to jiu-jitsu. So like, for example, I had a high ankle sprain patient and we were building those qualities, right? Getting him out of that pain, returning his strength, letting him jump, all this stuff. And, as a clearing task, we played like some ankle lock games where he had to sort of like escape my ankle lock, sort of leg entanglements, and we were applying sort of stress. We were stress testing those ligaments now. But if we change our examples, let's say it's soccer. I can't really design anything super representative to soccer in clinic other than maybe like reactionary drills or like some, you know what I mean? So again, the
Yeah.
goal is more just changing individual constraints to afford more as opposed to like representative. That's the biggest thing.
Yeah. You said a clearing task, and is that a Rampersad special? Or is
Yeah,
that
yeah,
like an
sorry.
actual
Um
clinical task? Is like that a clinical term?
Maybe I guess clearing tasks is sort of a blend of my clinical application and ecological, but um, clearing as in like clearing for return to sport sort of stuff. So in clinic, how I clear my athletes because I use like a stepwise sort of progression, like a traffic light system. One is like just pure range of motion. Then we check their strength values. We check we're checking essentially the qualities we've been working on. We've just how we actually
Yeah.
measure it. And then one thing is more about just like ligament integrity. And in that sense, we were testing it very representative to sport. So like in effort to clear those ligaments and make sure he's very healthy and he can, sort of live in that live environment, we made a task, like we made a game to test those ligaments and just the movements of sport. We just played a game. We just did jujitsu. And that's the best
Yeah.
part.
Yeah. No, that's cool. No, I like that. That's why I asked the question because I understood what you meant, but I was like,
Mm-hmm.
man, that sounds cool. Like clearing
Yeah.
tasks. That sounds sick.
Yeah.
I bet
Okay.
you
I will take it. I'll
that's a
coin
CLA.
it.
That's a CLA. That's an imposition of CLA onto
Yeah. Yeah.
clinical practice. I could. It just leapt out to me. I was like,
I
heck
like
yeah.
that. Okay.
Yeah. So like my mom's an occupational therapist,
Right
so
on.
a lot of in order to, and I worked in security, it's kind of a similar
Mm.
deal. Security exists as a check mark, right? You
Yeah.
don't like when you're a security officer, it's not like in the movies where you like take people down and stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
You will lose your job.
Yeah.
Unless you're a bouncer, but that's kind of
Fair.
different.
That's very different.
But you're technically security, but you kind of just, I don't know, you're not going to
Can
get
bully.
fired. But yeah. And it's like you do a lot of just stuff that almost doesn't matter. I mean, it does matter, but it's like you just go down the checklist and
Right.
the most important thing is you're just there as like
Mm.
for the insurance if something goes
Mm-hmm.
wrong. And like in the medical field, there's a lot of very stilted tests you have to do that aren't necessarily like representative or like the most useful, but they're there for like liability purposes.
Right.
And
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
you have to, a lot of that stuff is like embedded and you have to figure out how to map CLA onto that stuff.
Yeah, fair. You know what? You make a good point. I'll be honest, I know what you're talking about. Like some of those outcome measures that just like ask the most random
Yeah.
questions. I work in like private practice, so I don't use any of that stuff. I try to keep my stuff like as alive as possible. So I think about like
Luxury.
yeah, I just think about like I don't know. For me, like coming out of school, it was just like I just want to practice the way I want to practice, right? And like
Yeah.
I know the pedagogy, I know the methods can deliver real results, and so far so good, right? Like I'm having fun, my patients are getting back to sport, that sort of stuff. So my clearing tasks or like my tests are more based around the quality that we're achieving. So like range of motion is a super easy example, right? Like, okay, like he has limited range when I met him. We're doing all these interventions to improve range. How do we test if he has full range? We can measure it, right? Like we can, or like eye test it, whatever. Force is a really good one. Like I have a force dynamometer. So let's say, I don't know, whatever, like post knee surgery, there's a ton of quadricep atrophy. Like your quad gets way weaker. Doing all these interventions to increase quad strength, I need to make sure I can actually test that I've changed the quad strength though. So we use a force dynamometer. It's a force gauge. We'll isolate the quad. We'll see if it's producing the same amount of force as it did before, as the good leg, and things like that. Even same thing with like rate of force production. There's like validated tests in the literature that you can do for looking at rate of force production in lower limb, upper extremities, whatever. So I'll like cluster those as we're returning to sport or working through our phases of rehab. And then yeah, like injecting variability is when it comes to like that sort of stuff, when it comes to like our checklists, I think of it more in the intertask sort of variability that we were referring to before. So it's like, yeah, rate of force development in the lower extremities is a quality we're testing. And it might be like, yeah, like, can we do a double leg? Can we do it single leg? Can we do it through different planes of movement? Can we do it with different levels of chaos or reactivity? Like, that's fantastic. We're definitely
Yeah.
clearing that quality. We're owning that quality at that point.
Awesome. Yeah, you said another thing that reminded me of something that's really interesting about the sort of gap between science and practice. There's validated ways to test rate of force production, but like that's like vertical jump and stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
Are there others that are really well validated?
It would be like broad jump for distance. There's like a single leg triple hop for distance, but it is like around those tasks that you're getting to for sure.
Yeah,
You can
yeah.
still use like dynamometry and like look at like the actual like rate of force development, but again, that would be more like per muscle group, which is okay, which is fantastic. We want to make sure like a quad is firing at a great rate or something. But yeah, it's mostly
Yeah.
just test. And
Yeah, I feel like those actually cover a lot of ground for like different sports, but like there are probably some cases where you have this like one or two really good tests, but like they don't really capture the movement from the sport
yeah, yeah.
that you need to like produce force in.
Mm-hmm.
And like you as a practitioner, you can use other tests if you want for your
Yeah,
own,
yeah.
like to check off your own private boxes.
Literally, right? Like,
But you're kind of you're in a no man's land in terms of like evidence based practice.
yeah,
But that's kind of how
that's kind of
science
how it
works,
goes,
though,
though.
man.
Yeah.
Like you don't like how do you even get hypotheses for a good test to like a measure to actually validate in the literature if you
Yeah.
don't have that all the stuff that goes into it, right? Like the
Exactly.
anecdotal evidence.
Exactly. And like it's also not a huge deal. So I guess I'll make the distinction, like this goes for like strength and conditioning or physio. But again, the goal isn't to be necessarily sport specific. It's more about just increasing general qualities like we talked about before, or like opening up your individual constraints, however you want to phrase it, so that you can now take this new sort of like engine you've built and apply it to sport, right? So then it becomes like my clearing tests don't necessarily need to be super specific, because as long as the qualities have been increasing, it's going to transfer to sport, because you might get into like this weird no man's land of like trying to be specific but also losing the actual ability to develop that quality. So for example, like if we're thinking about lower limb strength and we're thinking about like a soccer player, whatever, I theoretically could get them like a weighted ball and some ankle weights and have them dribble around. It looks perfect, looks representative, not really, but you know what I mean? Like it looks very specific. But then like, okay, like the weight isn't really making him stronger, right? Like we're not actually gaining our quality that we're chasing, and we're definitely not making him better at soccer with this. So now I've lost both ends, right? Doing the
Yeah.
sport is like the most representative way to gain skills and also to clear yourself, right? If you're checking if this body part works, gotta get back to training, right? And like we'll see. Whereas training is just about developing the qualities. So in that sense, when it comes to clearing tasks, I don't need them to be super hyper specific, because the sport is specific. But there are some things where I'm like, yeah, like you had a lot of trouble with like butterfly guard. Like, let's try it out. Let's play a little game. I guess it is like a clearing task. Like, can I see this butterfly or this knee behave in this butterfly guard? Like, am I achieving like deep flexions? Are you producing force out of deep flexions? Are you able to sort of like post and lift off that leg or not? If I press it down, like adding like overpressure and that deep flexion as I'm sort of stapling that butterfly guard, is it painful? Are you collapsing? That sort of thing.
Yeah. That's excellent, man. So, yeah, so like it's the practice is always ahead of the science, man. Always.
Yeah. Well, sometimes I don't know. Kind of what we touched on earlier with certain physios staying in like very modality or passive care, because the evidence is pretty clear on that stuff. Some people just don't change clinically though.
Yeah, yeah.
So here and
Let's
there.
dig into that. Like what is maybe this is a red pill segment. Red pill on who to look for when you
Yeah.
need care. What to look for. Now people are gonna be injured and they're gonna like walk into an office and be suspicious of their
Dude, and I think
of the
warranted.
physio.
I think warranted. I think very warranted.
Probably, yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
I think it's important to be critical, especially when it comes to your health and your passions and your hobbies. Um, I think the biggest things that you need to look out for a clinician is someone that does lean a little bit more to active stuff. It should just make sense, right? Like if you are going to physio and you're only getting massaged and getting these sticky pads on you and like they're electrocuting you with those pads, and you actually
Yeah.
haven't done anything athletic in your rehab with the intention of being athletic, it kind of just falls apart, right? It should make sense. So you should find a clinician that leans, it doesn't have to be all or nothing, but that leans towards that exercise based load management, activity modification side. Because at the end of the day, if your goals are athletic, then you need to be doing athletic things to reach your goals, right? It should just make sense. I think another thing is like watching out for fear mongering, right? Something I rarely say is like, you can't do this, right? Like I rarely say that like you shouldn't be fearful of moving or fearful of your body or like pathologizing things. I met a patient recently who's like, I have severe scoliosis. And on X-ray, he showed me the X-ray report, and it, A, just straight up does not say that. B, like severe scoliosis is observable, right? And like
Yeah.
not like there's nothing there, you know what I mean? And he's like, but I
Yeah.
feel great. He's like, I can move, I can lift, and like, I'm like, where'd you get this from then, right? Like
Yeah. Who told you that?
another clinician told him that, right?
Oh
Um,
no.
so that's what I mean. So I think A, think about making sure you're not being fear mongered. B, make
Yeah.
sure that they're, have some stake in the game when it comes to active therapies or active treatments, especially if you have active goals. And I think the other thing is make sure they're planning with intention. So, like, I think I always tell all my patients, like, ask me the why. Why are we doing what we're doing? Everything should be with intention, with rationale, right? Like, you should never be confused through your treatment process on why you're doing a specific movement or why you're doing a specific modality. Like, what is the purpose of everything? And then I guess lastly, I'll just say, like, have a clinician that connects to the light at the end of the tunnel. Like, if I met you for the first time, we would assess you and we would game plan so that you know the Josh Peacock of today, how he's going to become the Josh Peacock of where he wants to be doing what he wants to do, back to competition or whatever it is. Like, make sure we can sort of connect to the light of the end tunnel, and so like the plan that we're outlining makes sense. That these two versions of your patient are connected, and if they can illustrate that to you, then you know that they're not just sort of guessing every single time you come in, or like throwing shit
Yeah.
at the wall. Like, oh, okay, like what are we doing today? You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
it should be pretty known.
Yeah.
So those are probably my biggest
Yeah,
things.
man. So I mentioned the grand mal seizures that
Mm-hmm.
gummed up my shoulders, or really this one the most. And there's a whole like, and the point of this is that you need to get a second opinion. But I
Yeah.
fainted before, from like I stood up really fast and then fainted. And put my head through a wall, and I think I was I was concussed. So I ended up went to the emergency room,
Mm.
and they took some X-rays, and I had bleeding in the back of my brain.
Wow, really? Eh? Sorry to hear that.
But the the bleeding was up here,
Okay.
or where was it? here, but I hit back here, and the bleeding was old.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So they're like, yeah, this is weird because we have this causal story
Hmm.
that we're kind of assuming about what's going on here. It's just kind of a mystery. We don't really know what's going on here. So like I had a practitioner to look at it,
Mm.
and he's like, yeah, I don't know. And this dude's like a brain surgeon. It's like, yeah, we don't know that well. So I ended up moving, and I had another brain surgeon look at it. And like a year later, and he's like, "Oh yeah, I know what that is. This has nothing to do with the fall.
Yeah.
It's been there since you were born.
Right.
This is
Right.
a cavernoma, or form of an AVM, which is an arteriovenous malformation. It's tangled
Yeah.
blood vessels in your brain."
Okay. Great.
And so he scheduled me for a craniotomy because you got to have that taken care of.
Mm.
And the seizures was between that appointment and my surgery. So because it had been the surgeon, because it hadn't affected me for
Hmm.
like a year, he didn't put me on anti-seizure medication because it's pretty heavy. I was on I was on Keppra after that, and Keppra, like, it screwed up my sleep.
Sure.
Like
Yeah. Yeah.
I struggle with it even now. Like I'll fix it occasionally, and then
Mm.
just very easily slip back into
Mm.
being up too late. The Yeah, Kepper, like I would be up till like 3 and just couldn't sleep. But so I understand why he didn't put me on it. But I almost died. So
Right. Right. A little bit of
like
a
I had
trade
3
off. I
grandma
don't know.
seizures. I had to be revived and everything, and then yeah. So but yeah, get a second opinion, dude.
Yeah. Yeah.
It might.
To be honest, like a lot of my population are people that have tried physio before, and they're like, I don't know, either A, just they weren't seeing results, or B, they just didn't really like the vibe. I hear that a lot. Like, oh,
Yeah.
I don't know, I didn't really like the vibe of that place. Like, okay, yesterday was a great example. Actually, I have this like full Achilles rupture come in, and he's like, he literally tried physio the day before. So he tried physio at another place on Tuesday. I saw him yesterday, and he came in. He's like, "Oh, I don't know." He's like, "I didn't really like the vibe." He's like, "I don't think they really understood that, like, I am athletic and need to be athletic, and stuff like that." He's like, I don't know. I didn't feel personable or whatever." And like after us, like we game planned like 3 phases of care and how we like increase physical qualities to get him back to meeting the demands that he needs to meet to do sport or his job, whatever. And after that, he's like, "Yeah, like this makes sense. Like this feels good." And I was like, "Sweet." Like that's the goal. But that happens a lot. Like we have a ton of people that come in that have just tried before,
Hmm.
and then I don't know, either it just didn't connect with them or they just weren't seeing results. So
Yeah.
they're exploring. So yeah, I think second opinions are fantastic.
Yeah, yeah. Especially if you get a really bad diagnosis, like you have severe
I know.
scoliosis,
Yeah,
but you feel good.
yeah.
Well,
And then you
that might
literally
be an
just hinder
indicator that you
yourself
need.
at that point.
Yeah, that might be an indicator you need to go see somebody else
Yeah,
for
yeah,
real quick, just to get a second opinion, and maybe they'll tell you, yeah, this is kind of somewhere between,
yeah,
moderate and severe or something like that. But like at least it's a better diagnosis. But you looked at it, and it's like it's not severe at all.
yeah. No, literally. And it really is like the confidence, right? Like, I mean, I'm sure you know very well how like like, whether it's placebo studies or just expectations. Like, if you think you're going well and you think what you're about to do is going to help, it'll probably help. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah,
if your
yeah,
expectations are set, if your beliefs are set,
yeah.
and you have that like positive mind frame about it, that'll help. So sometimes a lot of my rehab is just like confidence building. That's actually where variability comes in a lot as well. Especially in like the early stages where I'll just expose them to movements, right? Let's say it's like, oh, it's super
Mm,
sensitive. They're very hesitant to move. Yeah, let's just move in a bunch of ways. I'm not at that point. I'm not even chasing a quality. I'm just getting
mm.
them exposure, right? And it's like, look, you can
Yeah,
actually do this. It's like, wow, like I haven't done this in like years because I've been too like scared or whatever. I'm like, okay, then you can do this, and then we just like build the confidence. We sort of scale up tasks and make them harder and harder, and eventually, like, oh shit, like I can do a lot more than I thought I could. And I'm
yeah,
like, yeah, pretty smooth, right? Like
yep.
that's actually a little sticking point within the rehab scene about CLA or dynamic system theory is some clinicians, and I don't know whether it's like an application gap or not, but some clinicians worry about, I guess, other clinicians that apply CLA, that they apply or use variability but lose the actual quality that they're building. And they're like we talked about, they're not separate. You can think about variability as a parameter of the quality you're building. I think more so they're thinking about like almost differential learning, just variability for the sake of it. Like, oh, I'm just gonna do a bunch of random drills with this person. It's like, okay, like what did you
Yeah.
actually help them with now though? You know what I mean? So
Right,
again,
which is a skill learning quality. And that's not for
exactly,
conditioning. That's not
exactly,
for
right,
recovery.
exactly
Yeah,
that.
yeah,
And again, like I think there's like a place for variability for the sake of variability, and maybe that might
yeah.
be with those patients where they haven't moved in a while, or they're hesitant, or like their limiting factor is rigidity. Where it's like, oh,
Mm-hmm.
something feels off because like I can't get my squat right, and
Mm-hmm.
I know I have to keep my back straight, my feet forward, and whatever. I'm like, let's just explore. Let's explore a little bit,
Yeah,
and then we
yeah,
explore a little bit, and now the weight's going up like crazy, you know. So it's like, okay.
yeah, yeah,
So I think there's
yeah.
value in that, but for the most part,
Yeah,
have your intentions set and sort of use variability strategically.
yeah.
The real thing.
I imagine that variability does have a lot of value for recovery, but like it's
Mm,
the return on investment will disappear for that because eventually you've got to add more load,
exactly.
and it becomes like as you start adding load, you can't just have the same weight across all the different
Exactly.
exercises you got to do.
100%. Right.
So it becomes a hazard,
Yeah.
and you have to be a lot more strategic about it. And then you have the specialization problem. Like, do I want to do all this, or do I want to specialize in something more? And like,
But
try to
yeah.
do a little extra on the sides, like supplemental. Like, there's all kinds of ways to program it. Probably
Hmm.
infinite ways to
Oh,
program
dude.
it.
Yeah. That's why, like, just having
That
some sort of
works.
framework, any sort of framework, I kind of say, because like most people
Mm-hmm.
do just plan session to session, have some sort of framework, just organize your thoughts, because it really is like an infinite game. And that's where it sort of alludes to, right? Like lower extremity strength. I might like work in variability as a parameter. So it might be like lower extremity strength vertically. Let's say lower extremity strength side to side, that sort of thing. And we can explore lower extremity strength as a quality that we're not sacrificing strength, right? Because the load's heavy enough, the reps are dictated by that load, but now we're just exploring the way we express that quality down the line.
Yeah.
And again, that's that like
Cool.
intertask variability.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit of combat sports
Let's do
specific
it.
here before we wrap up.
Yeah.
What are the injuries you see the most
Oh, it's
for grappling and striking?
I think by far knee stuff.
Yeah.
By far, I see so many knees. I love it. I love lower extremity stuff. I've recently, like the last few weeks, a lot more shoulder stuff, but knee stuff, whether it's like meniscal
Mm.
ligaments.
Mm.
Yeah, probably the most is like ligament stuff and meniscus stuff. Sometimes you get like, I don't know, patella tendinopathies, but combat stuff is mostly trauma related.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So what are some things that you can actually do to prevent those injuries?
preventing. So that's an interesting thing. I don't think there's anything you can do to prevent. Because sports are sports, and
This
they're
is blunt force trauma.
yeah, right. You know what I mean.
Yeah,
Sports
just
are,
don't do it. That's how
and
you
like
prevent
that's
it.
never the option, right? Like that's never the solution. Sports are sports. They're chaotic. They're dynamic. Things are gonna happen. I think
Mm-hmm.
when we think about the goal of physio, like we talked about, like increasing those qualities, I always think about like uh, your body, any part of your body. We'll take knee for example. It has a certain capacity to tolerate load, right? Like we have this capacity to like yeah, just tolerate stress and load and like whether that's physical, mental stress, lack of sleep, lack of recovery. And a certain movement, whether it's like being above that capacity for a little bit, like the gap starts to widen, or it's some sort of trauma which is like aggressively a demand above that capacity, that's where injury occurs, right? So our goal is like, we have this patient that's hurt, and we have like back to sport demands, right? And we need to bridge this gap. We need to get your qualities back to handling that, and maybe even a little bit more, like over prep you essentially, so that like the next time this happens, maybe you still get hurt, but maybe it's not as bad. Or maybe you just straight up don't, because now you're a little bit stronger, you're a little bit more mobile, you have range that maybe you didn't have before, right? Especially
Mm-hmm.
when we think about injuries that come about because of another site. So, for example, this isn't going to be hyper specific, but if we think about, are you familiar with like the matrix back take from K-Guard?
Yeah.
Okay, sweet. We've seen a ton of LCL injuries from that matrix. You like sort of like throw up that leg, and then you're sort of in that L position. And as they set their weight back, you pop that LCL in your knee, though, obviously. But if, let's just say, you have more adequate hip external rotation, because like the LCL starts to get force in that movement once your external rotation of your hip is exhausted, right? So if you had more external rotation as a whole, you probably would have bought yourself more time before LCL ever even felt stress, right? So you can essentially increase those physical qualities that we were talking about, bridging that gap, even getting ahead even more to sort of either reduce severity of injuries or maybe instances that would have gotten you injured maybe don't get you injured anymore, but like something will get you injured down the line. And I guess yeah, that's the biggest thing when it comes to like injury prevention. It's just about building those qualities so you're just safer. Again, no one's really complained about ever being too strong or too flexible. Like, oh, dude, I'm way too fast. Like, you know what I mean? So it's like if you build those qualities I explain it to my athletes like a sports game. Like you have those 5 qualities, and if you can like raise the stats or put like points in those stats for life, like you're gonna have a better body, a safer body, a stronger body, that sort of thing.
Yeah. I like that word over prep. Like you can't prevent, but you can prepare.
Yeah.
Right? That's about all you can do.
Exactly.
Man, I had a pretty nasty injury, knee injury, not even doing martial arts. I was playing volleyball in the rain, and it was like slippery.
Yeah.
And I had already literally fallen like twice at this point, like just flat. And I know how to fall well enough that like I didn't hurt myself.
Yeah.
Like I was a little bit of like blunt, it was not pleasant, but like I wasn't injured. And one time I jumped to get the ball, and then when I landed, my foot slipped, and then like it got nasty leverage on the knee.
Yeah. Did it cave inwards, sort of thing?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And dude, that hurt so bad. I couldn't walk for like a week, and I went and got it X-rayed. Nothing tore.
Yeah, probably no issues.
And up until that, it felt so nasty though. My knee was so like unstable, and then swole. Like I couldn't do anything. Like I lived on the 3rd story of an apartment back then, and I was able to get up the stairs and could not get back. I couldn't I had to wait to go get the X-ray because I could not walk down the stairs. And so, but it was so nasty, and like it looked bad. But nothing tore, and like up until that point, and this is a correlation and whatever. I had been squatting, like over 200 pounds, right? Which I'm not a big guy, so that's pretty good for me. And I'd been doing that for a while, and I was like, I'm pretty sure that helped prevent me from getting a tear, and, like, having to get a surgery. So yeah, prep, dude.
yeah, right. Like you prepped your muscles and ligaments and everything around the knee to be stronger and thicker, and you know what I mean. So yeah, I think you hit the nail on the hammer right there.
Yeah. Last question.
True.
How do you feel about isometrics for?
Oh, I love them.
Prep.
I love them. I think. Okay, so this is a tricky thing. Again, it's all intention based, right? Like, what are you using this ISO for, right? Like, yeah. I guess that's the first question. Like, what are you using this ISO for? So ISOs can be really used in like early stages to sort of have an injured tissue learn to produce force again in a safe way, but still produce force, and it can even be like analgesic or reduce pain a little bit. ISOs can be used in later stages to sort of squeeze out extra range. Like if we think about like if you think about like external rotation of your shoulder, right? Some people like, think about like a pitcher. Some people get like this gnarly external rotation where they're pitching because like velocity is just whipping them into it, right? But some people can sort of like strengthen and gain that range sort of by themselves. They have like the muscular control to sort of close that gap between like passive and like their own range.
Mm-hmm.
And like ISOs are a good way to train at end range, right? Because you don't really want to like slam through end ranges. So like being able to go here and do like a passive sort of isometric liftoff can really start to help, I guess, like strengthen, but like expose you to like newer ranges. Um,
Yeah.
and then ISOs, especially for like tendons, are super good. Tendons love load, but they hate velocities if they're pissed off, right? They don't
Mm.
love being stretched, especially quickly. So like tendons are or like
Yeah.
ISOs are a great way to inject some sort of strength stimulus in a non-irritating way. So it just really
Mm-hmm.
depends your intentions. I think every tool has viability if you're intentional and smart with how you're using it.
Yeah.
Essentially.
I've read that. So first of all, your tendons they don't strengthen as fast as your muscles do.
Mm.
They kind of lag, which is why guys on steroids still get injured when they get
Is
up to
that it?
when they're pushing. That's what I've
Maybe. I don't know.
hearing from different people, like guys that are moving crazy weight,
Sure.
being on, because in steroids you can move up really
Yeah,
fast,
yeah, yeah.
and then you can put in some unreal volume on top of that.
Yeah, it's
And I've
probably the
heard that
volume work.
they get tendon injuries
Probably.
because the tendons can't, the force that the muscles are producing, it just
Yeah,
rips
that
the
makes
tendon
sense. That
out.
makes sense. I've never really thought about that, but
Yeah.
yeah, that makes sense.
But I bring that up because
Mm,
like it's like, okay, yeah, you're strong enough to do a movement,
mm.
but it's like, do you really want to load up really fast when your tendons are still trying to catch up?
Yeah, 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 literally, right? And like that's a great place for isos. That's also just a great place for like heavy, slow stuff.
Yeah.
Because like yeah, tendons don't love velocity too much. Probably the most irritating factor. Because velocity
Mm,
demands are just harder demands than like resistance, generally speaking, right? So like
yeah.
things that happen quickly, it's just a harder thing to deal with than heavy stuff. Which is why like a quality we look at is rate of force development or like your plyometric capabilities. Like, can you handle stuff at speed? And if not, let's increase that essentially.
Would it be accurate to say that the isometrics is kind of a unique way to isolate and strengthen the
Yeah,
tendons?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's a great way. I think so. If we're thinking about tendons, like we want to make sure this tendon, again, tendons they're very complicated in the sense that they produce force, but more from the fact that they lengthen and sling back. That's like the main sort of thing, right? So when you're doing an isometric, when you're thinking about applying it to a tendon, you're sort of strengthening the muscle and like the tendon stiffness, so like the ability to absorb force essentially, or like yeah, like the structural integrity for that tendon to sort of like be a little bit more integral and stiff and like I guess yeah, absorb force or produce force there at specific joint angles or like specific lengths. So you can start to train it over that sort of length curve. But then you also want to make sure that tendon can go through space as well. So that's where like heavy, slow stuff comes in. Like we want to make sure that
Mm,
tendon can like stretch and then come back. And then eventually
yeah.
you want to start to introduce speed because that's where the main game comes. We
Yeah.
want to make sure that tendon can be spring like.
Yeah. Isometrics can be very sensitive
Mm,
to the angle that you train it at.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So it's nice,
So
it's nice
like
to
you
explore.
get out of that angle, it's not so strong anymore.
Yeah, exactly. And that might be a good place to start doing some ISOs. Is like, okay, let's start to learn to produce force from that angle before working on getting in and out of that angle, which can be irritating
Mm,
sometimes. Which I guess in and of
wow.
itself is like intra-task variability, right? Like we're doing the same sort of
Mm,
ISO for the same muscle group, but we're changing our angle a little bit, which is still important though.
mm.
Yeah,
Yeah, Bruce Lee really was right about everything.
yeah.
He was all about
Maybe,
the isometrics and all that stuff, the strength
maybe.
training.
Yeah,
He
yeah.
was ahead of everybody, dude. He was even doing the electrodes, the
Yeah,
stimulation, all that
he
kind of
reaped the
stuff.
results for sure. Um, but yeah, I think
He had to die too soon, man. He just would have sucked up all the air in the room. I wouldn't even have a
maybe,
podcast right now.
maybe, or he would be your best guess. Um,
Oh yeah, dude.
hell yeah. I think the biggest thing, I guess, biggest takeaway from our conversation today is that variability changes in rehab, right? Like we can't apply it the same way as like skill acquisition. I think number one thing is just be intentional with it, right? Like
Mm,
again, variability for the sake of variability has a place, but for the most part, be intentional with it. Have a framework. Again, I sort of think of it or visualize it as a parameter of quality, so I don't lose the actual quality. And I think name of the game is look for a good clinician. We talked about that quite a bit. One that works towards your goals, one that it makes sense. It should make sense. It should make like intuitive sense. Like the stuff you're doing makes sense on how you're getting to your goal. Question things and just make sure if you're a clinician or a patient, everything's moving with intention. Like what's the intention behind things? Probably the biggest thing.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Fantastic, man. Appreciate you coming on.
Of course.
Where can people find you? Who do you want to plug?
Yeah, that's great. So first thing, I'll do a little shout out. So one, my mentor is also Josh Chung, curated mobility on Instagram. Fantastic clinician. Again, introduced me to dynamic system theories. I'd also like to give a little shout out to Cal Jones. I've met with Cal Jones once before. I know you had him on the podcast.
Cool.
He was my route to like how do I apply this in sport, and truthfully, it's just all representative learning design stuff. But he was fantastic in helping my understanding. I also want to shout a little bit to Yuji Suzuki. He's a eco-minded sort of chiropractor out in the States. We had I think we had 2 calls, maybe just exploring how we apply it. And my last call, we just sort of talked about my current understanding and how I think about it. And he really sort of like just legit checked it, really liked it, made sure it all made sense. And then for me, you can find me on Instagram at Josh R Physio. That's probably the best place to find me. Josh R Physio, you'll see my website, you'll see my stuff there. That's perfect. And shout out to you. Thanks for the opportunity. Thanks for having me on as well.
Yeah, for sure, dude. Mm-hmm. Yeah, man. Thanks for coming on and sharing your practice wisdom.
Of course.
And I remember Yuji, I've heard him, I think, on Adaptable Athlete podcast before.
Maybe, yeah. Likely, I think so.
So, yeah, you can check out his stuff, too, on his content. If I recall, I think he works with combat athletes and like basketball, and
I think he's mostly field based.
Field based, yeah.
Yeah, I don't think too many combat athletes, from my understanding, but he, despite
I might be mixing it up with someone else.
Despite that, he's still a fantastic clinician. If you are a combat athlete around his area, great option for sure.
Awesome, man. All right. Well, we'll have to do this again sometime,
dude. I would love it. We can dive deeper, ask more questions, whatever it is. I had a great time. Appreciate you.
Man. Me too.
Cheers, brother.
Thanks for listening. Before you go, can you do me a huge favor? Positive reviews help the show get more listens. If you got value from this episode, please leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. And don't forget to check out combatlearning.com for more resources on skill acquisition and coaching. See you on the next episode. This episode was produced by Micah Peacock, including the intro and outro music.